Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Library Tour of Doom, a tour of my endless library that is being conducted by Lord Ganesha and I in order to stiffen your bookish moral fiber. We are going book by book through every book that I own, every ebook that I own, and every book that I ever have owned. And there's no end in sight. No end in sight. We're not even at triple digits. We're a long way off from triple digits, so who knows how long this will take. We'll all be dead and buried and still doing this Library Tour of Doom. And today we're doing a hardcover graphic collection, a comic book collection of the Ultimates. This is written by Mark Millar and drawn by Brian Hitch. And if you see Captain America on the cover there and you look in the background, you see maybe what you recognize as Iron Man or Thor, you are correct. Marvel Comics started out in the early 2000s. They started out an alternate comic book line, the Ultimate line. They started out with Ultimate Spider-Man, where they was still publishing the Adventures of Peter Parker, the Amazing Spider-Man, but they wanted to do a separate reality, a separate imprint, in which writers and artists got to update those stories for a more modern sensibility. And the Ultimate Spider-Man was a hit, and was followed by Ultimate X-Men. And that also was a hit, where familiar characters were re-envisioned and writers were given a little bit of free rein as to how they reinterpreted things without supplanting the original continuity, which was still ongoing. So the Ultimate Universe was still ongoing. Naturally, this led people to wonder, well, what about the Ultimate Avengers? And built in that same world with all of that same inner continuity. And the idea quickly caught on, and there was speculation as to who Marvel would get to do it. And I was terrified that it would be this same team, Mark Millar and Brian Hitch, because they had years before done a team book called The Authority. That was beautiful and it was exciting, but it was beautiful and exciting in the way of a drug high, in the way of a cocaine high. So it was beautiful and exciting, but really harmful. really left you with a really sordid feeling once you're over it. Once you've walked out of that room, then you have a really sordid feeling for a lot of it, about a lot of experiences. You can still fondly remember the highs, but it doesn't feel the same. It's not pleasant in the way that a lot of reading highs are. And I read The Authority during their run. I doted on it. I was eager for every issue to come out month by month. And The Authority was a team of superheroes who had, the various collection of superpowers, were deeply distrusted by the outside world, and who didn't really like each other much. It was noteworthy because the main character, Jenny Sparks, had a pre-scripted lifespan. Her lifespan was the 20th century, and when the 20th century ended, she was going to die and knew it. It was also noteworthy because it had Apollo and the Midnighter, Batman and Superman ripoffs, who were a gay couple. And that a lot of people thought, isn't that interesting? Isn't that a step forward? The team's doctor, the team's magic wielder, was a drug addict. And the things like that made the Authority interesting to read. Also, Mark Millar has a really good ear for dramatic pitch. He has a really good sense of a dramatic payoff moment. I'm not saying he's all that good with the broader plot, but boy, oh boy, his dramatic moments will make you sit up and take notice. And even so, as much as I like The Authority, I dreaded that kind of sensibility coming to Marvel Comics. I dreaded it out loud. I dreaded it in print, saying, well, much as I love this, please don't import this kind of stupid, drug-addled cynicism to the Marvel Universe or any other superhero universe. But that was impossible because The Authority was really popular, and eventually Millar and Hitch were given the green light to do this book. And I breathed a little sigh of relief because at least this isn't the main continuity of Marvel Comics, where the Avengers are heroes, where they're motivated by what's right and by altruism, and where they mostly like each other. Instead, in the Ultimates, we get the exact opposite of that. This is a giant block of cynicism, just from start to finish. The heroes in this team are not heroes. They all have self-interested motives. They're not trying to do the right thing, except with a couple of exceptions. And mostly, except with, again, a couple of exceptions out of a cast of 10 people, mostly they are grubby, petty, insinuating, sexist, racist, horrible people who hate and distrust each other as much as they hate the enemies that they're fighting. Why anybody thought this was a embracing new vision of superhero comics, I have no idea at all. And that is not to sell this book short, because there are amazing dramatic beats in this first volume. This first volume, I think, collects the first 12 issues. And there are amazing dramatic beats throughout here, some that just cannot be improved upon. But it's dystopian versions of the main characters. Giant Man, the Wasp, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, the Black Widow, Hawkeye. It's dystopian characters. It's dystopian versions of these people. And it's only when you reread this, I reread this hardcover just recently, that you realize what a filthy reading experience this is. It's got dramatic beats to it. It is propulsive, but it's also filthy. These characters are horrible people. They are effectively as bad or worse than the villains they're fighting. And they never stop reminding you of it. They never miss an opportunity to remind you that they are racist or fascist or ultra-nationalistic or homophobic or bigoted in some other way or crass or callow. Never. They never miss an opportunity to do that. Now, I imagine that part of that was intentional on Mark Millar's part. Part of that was that he wanted his Ultimates to be the kind of mirror image of the sloganeering optimism of the Stan Lee era of Marvel Comics. But that sloganeering optimism was popular for 80 years for a reason. And this was popular too. The Ultimates was incredibly popular, went on for a long time. A lot longer. There's another hardcover volume just this size. In it, Captain America is revived from suspended animation from World War II. And Tony Stark is Iron Man, and he is wearing a superpowered suit of armor. The major departures here are the Hulk is gray. Bruce Banner cannot control becoming the Hulk, and the Hulk has a rudimentary kind of intelligence. He can talk, at least enough for us to know that he's homophobic. But he's also cannibalistic. He eats people. When he beats a supervillain, he then tears off their head and starts eating them. Not under any mind control. It's just, he is that way. And there's Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. There's Ant-Man and the Wasp. But they're both sociopaths, him more than her. And at one point he does something horrific to her. Beats her, first of all, because he's an abusive husband. But then he does something even more horrific than that and doesn't care. He doesn't care if she even survives the horrific thing that he does to her. And the attitude on the part of Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., who in this graphic novel, yeah, see, aren't our heroes wonderful? In this graphic novel, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. is... it won't take long to find an example here. Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. here is Samuel Jackson. He is just drawn that way. Let me see if I can get a nice close-up. Because this is... yeah, can you make that out? The bottom panel there? Hitch just draws him as Samuel Jackson. Which is going to become important in this little tirade, I guarantee you. But when in the aftermath of what Hank Pym does to his wife, when everybody knows what he's done, the horrible thing, not just beating her, but something much worse than that, attempted homicide, Nick Fury and the agents of the government say, well, yeah, it sinks, but we still need him for this big mission. So right and wrong, personal responsibility, completely out the window. Just completely out the window. Hank Pym is allowed to just wander off the reservation having done that. And the only comeuppance that he gets is one of the great dramatic beats in this whole volume. Because Steve Rogers is from the 1940s, and Mark Millar thinks that just makes him an antique. So he decides that since the government won't do anything about Hank Pym, he will. He uses S.H.I.E.L.D. technology to track Hank Pym down at a bar in Chicago and goes to find him. And the final panel of that issue, when these were coming out as individual issues, is him suddenly appearing behind Hank Pym and saying, "A word in your ear, Dr. Pym." And you know already what's going to happen. You know that he's going to pick a fight with Hank Pym, with Giant Man. And he does. And you would think, I'm trying to give Millar any kind of credit here, you would think, okay, if that's the dramatic beat and it's done really well, and if at least somebody is doing the right thing to bring a wife beater to justice, then what's your problem? Well, because it's left wide open whether or not Captain America is doing that because it's the right thing to do or because he has the hots for Janet. It's left wide open whether or not he would have done that if the victim had been anyone else. And that kind of thing goes throughout this book. It goes throughout this book. There's virtually nothing to admire anywhere in here. as I realized as I was rereading it. There are those dramatic beats, and there's the great Hitch artwork, which is just amazing. Let me see if I can get you a double spread. Yeah, there's Captain America fighting Giant Man, and it's amazing, just amazingly good. Just you can't really tell in the sunlight with the refraction and all, but the panels flow. Hitch, when he's on his game, he's telling a story without any need for an artist. There's that, and that's all throughout here. And the climax of the story is an invasion by an alien race named the Chitauri, who's never been seen before in a Marvel comic book. They are obviously supposed to be the Skrull, only not cartoony. Not a cartoony version of the shape-changing enemies known as the Skrull, but something else, something much worse. And all of that together, all of that description together is going to lead you to understand the final point that I'm going to make here, which is that my hope that this would be contained in the Ultimates universe of Marvel Comics couldn't have been more forlorn and couldn't have been more dashed. Not only were Millar and Hitch, conscripted after the success of this for every superhero team in the mainstream universe imaginable, always begrubbing them with the same kind of nihilistic cynicism. Not only that, but if you know nothing about this comic and you've been listening to me, you might be thinking, well, gee, a lot of the elements that you're describing sound like the Marvel Cinematic Universe Avengers. And you'd be entirely right to think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is built on this book. It's not built on 70 years of Stan Lee's continuity. It's built on this book. Right down to the casting of Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury. Right down to that. Right down to making that happen. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thor is depowered. Very much so. He is mostly just a tough guy with a hammer. And the hammer is everything. Now, Marvel went away in the latter half of the latest phase of their movie making. They tried to get away from that, tried to show you that Thor is amazing, hammer or no hammer. But in the initial starts of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's a guy with a hammer. And without the hammer, he's not much of anything. That is absolutely true. In this reality, Thor is depowered. He is a psychiatric patient, an ex-nurse who has a magic hammer. In this continuity, Captain America is up-powered. At the same time that Thor is being down-powered, Captain America is up-powered. So that he can suddenly leap 30 feet from a standing start. So that he can suddenly do all the kinds of things that we see Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe do. The Captain America in Marvel continuity cannot grip a metal bar and with his other arm hold a helicopter in place. He can't do that. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe he can, and who knows what else he can do. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Tony Stark is a louche, smart-alecky alcoholic. In the Marvel comic book continuity, a great story arc is devoted to him overcoming alcoholism. It is viewed as a moral failure, as a physical failure, as a danger. In addition to everything else, you don't want someone who's drunk getting inside a suit of armor. All that part of it was scrapped. The redemptive arc for Stan Lee's world was scrapped in favor of just making Tony Stark that way. And also the lineup. There are all sorts of Avengers you could pick for a Marvel Cinematic Universe. Instead, what do we get? We get Samuel Jackson playing Nick Fury, and we get Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, the Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. Just like this. This is the blueprint that the creators of the Marvel Cinematic Universe used to create that universe. And it's sometimes down to individual panels, individual visual gimmicks. So it turns out that the Mark Millar and Brian Hitch version of the Avengers, this incredibly cynical, incredibly grubby, incredibly non-heroic version of the Avengers, it turns out not only was that not confined to the Ultimates universe, but it was absolutely inescapable. It is now the permanent version of the Avengers in the minds of most people in the world. And this is where it all started. If it didn't start with the Authority, then it started here. But we'll be getting to the Authority, because the Library Tour of Doom will certainly include it at some point or other. Well, that is your book for today. It's The Ultimates. Just Volume 1. Volume 2 is epic. It's an even bigger epic scale. It also has a wide epic storyline. I have it here. We'll get to it. But not today. This has gone on long enough. These Library Tour of Doom episodes must not be half-hour long. They must not become that. We must band together to make sure they do not become that. Anyway, that's your Library Tour of Doom for today. I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.